said, Basecamp Beta's back. There's no more technical issues going forward. Everything is
That's right.
Smooth sailing. Smooth.
Yes. So, hey, welcome back to Basecamp Beta. It has been 1 minute, 2 minutes. How many minutes, Chris?
We probably should have looked up when the last episode was, huh?
I mean, that would have been the responsible, organized, a very un-BCB thing to have done. But
Yeah, it was a while ago, but
So, in case you've forgotten, I'm Shawn O'Sullivan. I'm here with my good friend.
I'm Chris, and we did this podcast called Basecamp Beta. If you're just joining us, let's call it the first season of Basecamp Beta was mostly, it'll be part of this feed, so you can always go back and listen.
That's
We're
right.
not scrubbing history. But the first season of Basecamp Beta was basically done by us in 2019, alongside with Chris Zaldua, and
Katie was a big part of it too.
And Katie as well. And over the course of 2019, we wanted to. Well, there weren't many music podcasts out there. We kind of got in. I mean, there were music podcasts, but we kind of got in on the. Before the second wave of we were kind of riding the crest of that second wave of podcasts, and then very smartly got out.
Yes. Well, yeah, no, I mean, there were music podcasts, but there weren't any other music podcasts on my radar that were covering underground dance and experimental music, and also sort of exploring its, kind of political and social contexts, right?
Yeah.
Like the climate of music podcasts in 2019 was Fantano styled music reviewers and nerds kind of. It was there wasn't much kind of historical, social, political discussion. And so we in 2019, so full disclosure, Chris and I are musicians. Unfortunately cursed with that status. And throughout the 10s, I think both of us had aspired to music being our career.
And we did. I mean, it was our career for most of that decade.
Or it was part of our careers.
Right, yeah, of course, yeah. But there was a wave of experimental, whatever we were into, which was this kind of weirdo New York-based scene of kind of weird electronics, you coming out of the weird parties in New York, and a kind of fertile ground of really interesting musicians in New York making kind of weirdo dance music, or at least finding dance music as a sort of structuring a structure for their kind of weirder musics, just
exactly.
Like putting weird stuff on an MPC and making weird dance music with it. That got weirdly popular, and we were
against all odds.
Yeah, and we were able to kind of have a bit of a career and tour and play shows and everything. And the kind of igniting reason for the podcast in 2019 was that not only was the music podcast landscape pretty lacking, but the music landscape was pretty lacking.
We had both waded fully into mid-career artist status. the three most dreaded words in any artist's lifetime. So what had for many years felt like this ascendant, momentum building collective project, really for myself, and I think for you too. We felt like we were part of a movement, right? We were in a secularized kind of way, preaching the gospel. We would go tour these places and bring weird cutting edge music to them. And by 2019, a real changing of the guards had set in. And we found ourselves not only with fewer gigs, but also, I think, just less and less inspired by what was happening.
Yeah, it was, the kind of mutual decoupling of us and the techno scene at large, where the techno scene had kind of settled in. We made a lot of at the time we made a lot of parallels to the kind of early 2000s minimal boom, the kind of techno settling into this very kind of uninspiring area. I don't think anyone would really deny that the landscape of techno changed quite a bit over that time. People may say for the better or worse, but
Well, yeah, I mean, we
moved away from what we were interested in.
Yeah, we brought the podcast about when a shift really had already been fully underway into like what people sometimes call business techno, which is now like an incredibly dated term. But
still, as far as I can tell, basically the scene. I mean, I don't know that much has gotten better since then, but I don't, at least in the techno scene. But
there had been a bunch of like there had been a bunch of trends that we didn't really cover, in the time from when we started the podcast and then when it went dormant. Like
for sure, yeah.
I think like I'm not really sure what is cutting edge with the youth now, but there was the whole kind of like trance into then kind of gabber trance thing, also concurrent with various kind of tech house and progressive revivals.
Concurrent with a kind of like drum and bass, jungle inflected type thing that I had always thought was going to come back, and then I just missed it when it did.
Yeah. If you go back on like, I've been long active on various internet platforms. I remember back in like 2004, I was posting on Global Darkness, the Dutch West Coast scene. Like, you know what? I think this is the year that breakbeats come back, man. I think UK hardcore is going to see a big revival. We're going to see, and, so I was a full 20 years, 15 years early on that one.
I used to write for a music blog in the early 2010s called Little White Earbuds, and every year at the end of the year, I was like, this year, man, drum and bass is coming back, and I was wrong every single time. Right. But it did eventually come back.
It always does. It always does. Return of the Repressed.
But yeah, we started the podcast to kind of critique a scene. I think we tried to not necessarily critique the musical content, but to focus maybe critiques or a kind of dissatisfaction we had, at least with the musical content, aiming that a little more towards the political and social issues that we had felt were there. Things having to do with, we had some episodes critiquing, the usual suspects in the dance music scene, but also we had some really great episodes with guests talking about, the BDS movement and things like that, which have only grown more salient with time.
Yes.
And so we did that for a while, and then when COVID hit, we kind of just got stunned, and I think we did a handful of episodes just together. But the bond of Basecamp Beta was the fact that we both worked at Control in Brooklyn at the time, and Basecamp Beta was basically recorded in the back room with kind of whoever was there. And
I mean, we would deliberately invite guests. It wasn't totally random, but yeah, I mean, there were plenty of times that mid-episode, and these episodes, even though what made it onto the air was, usually an hour, maybe an hour and a half, these episodes would sometimes stretch 4-5 hours of recordings.
Yeah, they were long and required a lot of editing. And yeah. But they were a good time, but lacking that sort of social structure, the podcast more or less went dormant. And also in the year of COVID, Black Lives Matter, lots of other things going on. I just don't know that we felt we had much to say about music. At least it didn't feel super salient to me.
No, same. I mean, like, if the first iteration of the podcast was, I think, both of us kind of finding a way to remain musically active while no longer centering our own kind of artistic activity. Yeah. The kind of end of that era was marked by us no longer feeling the need to kind of contribute our voices to what was happening. It felt like it was a really fragile time and a really exciting one. And yeah, some, aging, white, mostly guys, Katie was involved, and, many of our guests were not white, of course, but, it still felt like our perspective was not the right one for the moment.
Yeah. And and then I guess, for the subsequent years, it just I don't know, I feel like we had said all we wanted to say about techno, but at a time when we were also just kind of personally decoupling from the scene, where it was no longer a kind of like, I just kind of like no longer cared about what was going on in the techno scene, and I had no ties to it anymore.
Right. Well, you moved overseas. The pandemic happened. We both essentially fully retired from playing gigs, or at least went into soft retirement from playing gigs. We were pretty unplugged from the New York. I was pretty unplugged from the New York music scene, and it felt like it was. I mean, it was a big life shift moment for both of us in similar but different ways. That wound up leading for myself into the very unexpected path of resuming my higher education. I'd gone to Bard College many lifetimes ago, dropped out with one semester left, as a proper Bard student should do. And
yeah, you're doing it right.
That's right. All I needed to do was my senior project. Fuck that. I'm too cool for that. So over pandemic, I went back, finished that up, inspired by Katie herself resuming her undergrad. And after that, wound up completing a master's in, very unfortunately, in experimental composition at Wesleyan University. So, that was, I tried to escape music. I really did. And I wound up just back in it in a totally different way. And it wound up being a really amazing experience.
Yeah, I was going to say not unfortunate, because it seemed like you really hit a vein of something that you enjoyed and really I don't know, found a lot in. Yeah,
I mean, it was a life-changing, it was a life pivot moment. It was really, really big and really important. And I wouldn't undo that for a second. It's unfortunate because now I have not one, but two supremely useless pieces of paper that represent a lot of financial and time commitment. Wesleyan, by the way, is a funded program, so that is very rare in the world of masters. So I got paid to do it, and I strongly suggest any weirdos who are feeling adrift take a look at the program, because it is really amazing. I do want to plug it, but it's not gonna. Masters don't lead to careers, especially when they're in extremely niche fields. So it didn't resolve the problem. One of the big problems I was having going into the masters.
Yeah. And I guess in my time, since we've been away, I've mostly been working at Moog, doing product development. And that has been cool, but I don't know.
You did, like, if we're in the random plug zone, you did a spectacular series, which I admittedly have not yet finished watching all of. A spectacular series of synthesizer instructional videos.
I did. I got my Carl Sagan on. I tried to very intentionally, in the most nerdy way possible, make allusions to a MIT filmed lecture series by father of DSP Alan Oppenheim from the late 70s that you can find on YouTube. That was my inspiration for the series.
Along with Fassbinder and Hitchcock, maybe.
Along with Fassbinder, I made very obvious allusions to World on a Wire and various other Fassbinder films. And yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean that was a really fun project to do. That was kind of a thing I've always wanted to do. Was a kind of instructional series on how sound works, how synthesizers work, and also with a little more. I guess if I had to sum up my thinking behind the series, was that teaching that synthesizers learning how to use a synthesizer and program a synthesizer is often from this perspective of like, take a sound that's in your head and create it on the synthesizer. And how do you
Right.
do that? And how do you do it right?
Right.
Whereas, the synthesizer, I think is a tool for exploring sound and trying to give people the tools not to go from point A to point B to create something that they know, but to enjoy the process of just discovering sound on synthesizers.
Right. To go from point X to point Y.
So it's a point question mark,
Right,
to
right,
just
right.
kind of like, to just use your ears and let them sort of discover new sounds
Yeah.
for you.
When this question comes up, I always think of there's an amazing Thomas Dolby interview somewhere where he waxes poetic about his dream synthesizer of the future, which is exactly what you were saying. He's like, the future synthesizer will you will just think of a sound and it will recreate it perfectly for you.
Yeah, I mean the problem is like the only sounds generally, I mean, we're more or less like machine learning models. I mean, our brains are
I would strongly disagree on philosophical grounds with a kind of a machine model of cognition, but we can bracket that.
Yes, I mean, I'm just saying that basically, like, we in general, the sounds that we come up with in our heads are like from previous experiences.
Right,
We don't come up with like totally bizarre sounds in our heads. We may, and that can be a very interesting thing. But generally, the sounds that come into your head are some kind of derived in some way from things you've already heard.
Right. And in the context of music, those sounds are probably going to be scare quotes musical ones.
Yeah, exactly. Which is all totally fine. But the cool thing about synthesizers is that they can come up with sounds that you have no reference points for.
Right.
And that being if you're thinking of the space of sounds that a synthesizer can create, the sort of tonal, very musical sounds that simulate or replicate acoustic instruments you may be familiar with, or kind of canonical synth sounds.
Yep.
That space is a very small space of the sounds possible by a synthesizer. And there's a lot of shit sounds in there that are just kind of like, the closer you get to noise, the closer you get to sounds that may be technically quite different, but to the human brain sound
the same,
very similar.
Yep.
But there is this big in between space of really interesting sounds that exist in this kind of tension between those two things. And anyway, so this series was just to kind of give people the tools to explore, not the tools to like just robotically
make a fat
like,
Moog bass.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, of course you can do that, and I kind of show how to do that. But the idea is to push a bit further and just kind of, I also wanted to make a series that was like for, my bosses were like, oh, cool. It's a series for like, 22-year-olds to learn how to make a fat Moog bass. And I was like, nah, I'm kind of think of it more as like a series for like 15-year-olds who like watch like, PBS like science shows, who just kind of like want to like know the basics of how to like get sound working to then like explore and give that kind of like exploration, imaginative.
I think that's a really beautiful project. And that is one of the great things that YouTube facilitates, right? Is this like it's an incredible educational resource. That goes way beyond, no real shade to like Andrew Huang, but it goes way beyond Andrew Huang, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously the line between like, just kind of, my issue always with, things on YouTube is this kind of like, here's this piece of gear that you got to buy. And obviously like companies like mine have an interest in making that kind of content. Right. And generally people want to buy it because we live in a consumer society and people just want to see the new thing that they can spend money on and might, make them might give them the keys to some, might make their music better.
It's interesting because this was a shift that I feel like we started sort of documenting a little bit of this while the first real wave of this happened with BCB 1.0, with the kind of development of the synth-fluer economy, right?
Yeah, that was really kind of coming into being around then, and of course, like during COVID,
it skyrocketed.
The economy for synths rocketed, and then with the first wave of tariffs, they kind of things. I can tell you from the synth manufacturer side, did not so skyrocket. So there was a good year, and then there was a very bad year, and then there was the great, shipping debacles of that led to post-COVID inflation and all these kinds of things. That are still basically not getting any better, and in fact getting worse.
In fact, everything is getting worse. But hey, that's why we're back.
That's why we're back. So why are we back? What are we doing this time? What's different? We're not talking about techno anymore.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we will, and
It'll come up.
I'm sure we'll have guests who are deeply in those worlds. But I mean, I think like both of us in slightly different ways have once again kind of reconsidered our position as musicians into, I mean, essentially like pedagogical roles, right? Mm-hmm. Teaching is really a beautiful thing, and the creation of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge is really powerful and really, really necessary right now. As we see, like obviously over the last year, there have been completely insane attacks on academia and particularly the humanities. Yeah. So, I think both of our perspectives here are a little more geared around, basically sort of oral history / ethnography kind of purposes. That this is for research and historical documentation. So I mean, my thoughts were like, we will kind of bring things back, but have things focus a little more on the guests rather than just shit talking. And shit talking is awesome, and we love it. And there will always be some shit talking, but I see there being a really important, there being a really strong need for documentation of a lot of synthesizer designers, for instance, who are aging into oblivion. A lot of experimental musicians whose voices have not really been documented and may not go documented unless someone actually does it.
There's a lot of interesting things going on right now. It is kind of like a bit of a golden age, not just in terms of like synthesizers and the gear, but also just music. I mean, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is music. There are lots of interesting strains of music going on, lots of really interesting things in experimental music, lots of cross-generational things that have been happening. And like you said, lots of people, whether they be musicians, composers, engineers, just like patrons, like people who one way or the other contribute to this culture of underground music. And there's just a lot of people there that we want to talk to kind of answer the question of what it means to be an artist today, what it means to be involved in music, what it means to be someone who focuses on creative pursuits.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like both of us have become more involved in different facets of music, instrument production, for instance, in your case. In my case, more deeply involved with academia and kind of experimental compositional spheres or orbits. And so I think this is also like a good platform for us to get a little more into the technical weeds with some stuff than we did with the first iteration. Mm-hmm. A lot of my research while I was at Wesleyan was on, and this is in no small part inspired by your own work, Chris. I did a thesis on Serge Cherepnin. And so, when I was working on that, like I was doing a lot of kind of ethnographic work, and just all of these amazing voices were coming up, and these amazing experiences and perspectives. So, I think this is a great time for us to dig into deeper into both the kind of the technical weeds. Like we can talk about circuit designs and schematics a little bit at least.
Yeah.
And talk about the conceptual and social orientations of some of these instruments, as well as as well as a little more kind of heavy theoretical stuff as far as kind of both composition and also maybe things delving into like political economy and critical theory. So one of the big questions that kind of emerged in BCB 1.0. Which I mean, for me, I think for all of us, kind of wound up kind of covertly being the kind of central thesis of BCB 1.0 was the question of like, how does one live as an artist under capitalism? And BCB 1.0 explored that in a very what I always call the kind of folk ethnographic means. That it was this very very casual, off the cuff. Just like let's dive into, into how these conversations actually unfold, in real time with a bunch of mostly our good friends, and that was really interesting and did get to a lot of I think really important points that needed to be made in that moment. But I think zooming out, that question is, I mean. Obviously, that question is more vital than ever. Just last week there were this, string of reports into new books or whatever on the decline in working class participation in the arts. Hey, who would have guessed? Who would have guessed that the arts are indeed populated by a bunch of upper class twits?
Well, so I mean, the like when we ask the question, what does it mean to be an artist? How do you live as an artist under capitalism? The general answer is what position does the artist play in a capitalist system? And generally, that's one of the artisan, the sort of the bourgeois artisan that makes a kind of specialized product. Now in the sort of Fordist society of the mid-century, the mid-20th century, when you had a much larger middle class that did feel like being an artist, being someone, that artisan role is this kind of like, middle class bourgeois role.
Well, I mean,
not bourgeois, but this kind of middle class, like, just like artisan role. That felt more approachable. But as the middle class is been crumbling, disappearing, and as more people are pushed generally towards the precarious classes, the precarious working class, and wealth is just hoarded by a faceless upper. Well, it's actually not a faceless upper class. It's pretty. they got faces.
They sure do.
But that position of being an artist, as you say, is increasingly difficult, and it's increasingly difficult to identify how one is an artist, under these economic constraints.
Right. Well, I mean, so like the bourgeois conception of art and the role of the artist is a contradictory one in that. On one hand, it positions art as transcendental, right? Art exists for the sake of itself. This is like the Cagean stance, right? That you can experience the art like art for art's sake. It's you experience it kind of unmediated by cultural baggage. This is an insane position, but we can save that for other podcasts. Or art should stand for higher values, right? It should it should stand for freedom. It should stand for raising up the plight of the oppressed, whatever. So on one hand, art exists. The art object is upheld as this thing that exists for values higher than itself. Yet it is always tethered to the commodity form. Art can never transcend the commodity form. So this is a contradictory position that the art object itself is placed in, and the artist is always kind of navigating those two things. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to explore there, and like every artist is going to have their own ways of navigating that aesthetically, practically, work-life balance, like
yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's really rich grounds.
I'm a separate the art from the artist type guy, We're talking about art for moral values. I just, I read Celine recently, so, I'm I kid. I don't kid about reading Celine, but, he was...
as you shouldn't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, of course, I think it's okay to engage with artists who, and maybe this isn't an of course, maybe it's not a given, but of course, I do agree that it is. It's okay, and in fact, sometimes necessary to engage with artists whose politics you don't agree with and may in fact abhor. And
well, it's certainly interesting for if you're trying to understand where this what may seem alien strain of ideology comes from. It's interesting to engage with the art of that. I mean, there's always going to be there's plenty of throwaway art from that comes from a political place that you don't agree with. But there's also I think it's always worth identifying the interesting art that does kind of reveal something about those political persuasions.
Absolutely.
And that gives you a bit more of an understanding of something in order to you do with that what you will. If that makes you feel like you can better fight that kind of tendency, that's great. If it just makes you feel like you understand it a bit better, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary to understand the enemy to critique them. So on those grounds alone, one should engage with art that is created from a perspective that doesn't necessarily totally gel with one's own.
So basically, that's why we're doing That's why we're going to be doing Patreon exclusive movie episodes. I believe the first one is about the Melania documentary. That's what we're doing.
I'm not going to lie. I really want to see it.
Well, you're just a big Brett Ratner fan. You love Rush Hour.
Well, I'm not going to see it in the theater through legal means. I can't, in good conscience, give 1 cent to this regime. But I mean, it's got to be an incredible nightmare, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure it's fascinating in some way. I mean, again, like the auteurist perspective would say that, watching a movie by someone such as Brett Ratner has to at least be interesting, given, like, if you know that that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe, I don't know, probably not, but we'll see. We'll see. Find it in the first movie episode. No, but we, coming back, we do think we have been toying with the idea of maybe doing Patreon exclusive episodes where, Shawn and I bring movie heads, where we'll talk about, Euro sleaze and trash and, all sorts of
the good stuff,
all sorts of good stuff.
I think like that's also a good platform for, if we want to do artist deep dives, composer deep dives, if we want to, kind of maybe workshop, kind of like mini essays we're working on.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun little projects and things we want to explore with the platform. So.
Yeah. Speaking of, I thought because Shawn had recently watched, and this is just the fun part of the show. It's all been fun. But Shawn, I saw, just watched a movie that I watched somewhat recently that I really love called Lost in New York by the great Jean Rollin. I'll introduce Jean a little bit. Jean Rollin, for those who are uninitiated, was a French filmmaker, primarily active during the 70s, early 80s. And he is a really special kind of guy. He's really the embodiment of someone who made movies that really he knew what he wanted to make, and he hit it over and over and over again.
It's one of the most French directors of all time, too.
Of course. His movies are basically about half-nude vampire babes.
They're all about lesbian vampires. All of them. Every single one out of, we're talking 20, 30 plus films. How many films did he do?
So he did a lot, yeah. And surprisingly, they all more or less passed the Bechdel test. You wouldn't think that.
That is true, isn't it?
But most of the movies are just straight up about just like vampire girls who love each other, and it's somehow not creepy. And again, this is made all the more.
Well, they're sleazy, but not creepy. Yeah,
they're absolutely sleazy, but there's a genuine love that he puts into his movies, and a genuine just kind of like a real interest in this kind of this like vampire kind of erotic gothic thing. The other thing is he's an extremely visual filmmaker. The plots in his movies have basically are incidental. They don't matter all that much. The characters are generally they can actually, his characterizations can actually be kind of strong in the sense that they have in the relationships that they kind of display.
Usually there is a very compelling and fairly convincing relationship between two lesbian vampire women.
Yeah, exactly. And his movies, again, like the gothic imagery that he just kind of basically submits to the whole time. It's also worth noting that Rollin, to fund his movies, generally directed porn throughout the 70s. Right. He found that was basically how he could get money to make the movies that he wanted to do, which gave him
and some of his films from the era appear in both hardcore and softcore cuts. At least, yes. And forgive my pronunciation, L'Œuvre du Sang.
Yeah, there is a hardcore version of L'Œuvre du Sang, which is probably one of my favorites. Lips of Blood is the English translation, which is a really beautiful movie. And his movies, is basically through directing porn that he was able to find some artistic freedom. The very interesting thing about Rollin is he comes onto the scene. He was an art student, and his first major movie was kind of a short called Le Viol du Vampire, the Rape of the Vampire, which is a pretty wild title. But this was a very kind of 45-minute film. Shot in black and white that is really kind of Rollin's essence distilled. It's just kind of these really haunting, beautiful, gothic, eerie images of lesbian vampires just kind of hanging out in like a decrepit chateau in the middle of the woods. And he made this movie, and it was about 45 minutes long. And then he found some funding, and people wanted him to extend this movie to make it into a full-length feature.
And he extended it for 30 years.
He did.
Here's a cinematic history question that I should know offhand. Does Rollin's early work predate Jesus Franco's?
It's pretty contemporaneous. I mean, Jess Franco was doing a lot of stuff in the early 60s that was kind of not quite hitting his vein. But yes, Jess Franco's generally, I think, better known than Rollin.
Right. And Vampiros Lesbos is the most famous lesbian vampire movie.
And Jess Franco did a lot. There was a lot of variety in Jess Franco's work.
Yes,
Whereas
a
Rollin
lot more than Rollin. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Franco is always sleazy.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, Franco covers every kind of sleaze, and then also just other kinds of exploitation films too.
Totally. He played in a lot. He would do all sorts of different, popular exploitation genres of the time, whereas Rollin really kind of kept to his own thing.
It really is impressive. I mean,
it's really super impressive. And the funny thing is, really, right from the jump with Le Viol du Vampire, like I said, he makes this 45 minutes short, and then he extends it for like 50 minutes to make a kind of plot-driven movie, like a second part of the movie that has a bit more of a plot, because this is what the people who he was a student, this was kind of his experimental movie. He adds on this kind of plot-driven second part. It really doesn't work. He doesn't do plot-driven very well, and it kind of very charmingly fumbles the sort of plot-driven part of the movie. But whatever, this movie comes out, and very amusingly, it becomes very, very famous in France because this was, and I don't really know why this is or how this works, but basically all of these striking workers in May of 1968 find themselves going to the movie theaters, and this is basically the only movie that they can see. So this movie is watched by the entire nation of France, who's all on strike in May of 1968.
I mean,
and they're all.
What is there anything more French that has happened in the history of French?
There really isn't. But this,
like the whole nation is striking. There are student riots. They all go to see a lesbian vampire film because, of course, they do.
And it's in black and white and extremely artsy and full of all the kind of typical hallmarks of French foreign movies that you would kind of expect. But this is this makes Rollin kind of a very notable figure in France and kind of destroys his career because all these people go to see this movie that's totally inscrutable and weird and generally disliked. But for, some people it kind of hits. And yeah, like you said, he basically kind of commits to this. And what we want to talk about is a movie that Shawn, you saw recently, Lost in New York, which is right at the tail end of his career and a really fascinating, like we said, from 1968, he kind of plays in the sort of exploitation, sleaze genres that proliferate all over European and American, but primarily European film.
Italian,
French,
Italian, French, and Spanish cinema, particularly.
Yeah, exactly. But by the end of the 80s, he makes this movie called Lost in New York, which really, he emerges from the other side with this. It's about an hour long.
Right. So that was the first thing I noticed right off the bat. I am, I'm a long time, waiter in the trash bins of cinema. And, for me, like, I imagine the Vince McMahon meme, and, you have first panel is, 96-minute film. Second one is like 84-minute film.
Ooh.
Then you get to 79-minute film, and you're like, oh yeah.
Now you got my
talking.
attention. Now you got my
And so
attention.
when I see it's 54 minutes, I was just like, oh fuck, this it's on. But it's kind of a curveball. I mean, it is essentially a straight up experimental film. It is basically not narrative.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically Rollin going pure Maya Deren mode, making a very just totally experimental, nonlinear dream logic film, something that, better known directors like David Lynch would probably find a lot in.
I mean, but it's also, I mean, I really hate using the word abstract to describe anything because it doesn't actually mean anything. Or it means so many things that, to unpack what abstract means is a waste of time. But it is less narrative and more sort of film poetic than most David Lynch films.
For sure. Yeah. But this kind of dream logic thing, the movie kind of flits between, it is telling a grounded story about, wouldn't you guess it?
Two women in love. But
Two women in love.
hey, so the big curveball was, you watch this film for 35 minutes and you're kind of like, wait, they're not vampires?
There is one vampire,
and then you're treated to one vampire scene.
Yeah,
so
it's got to be in there.
He still stuck to the script. He still threw it in there. It was like David Lynch throwing in the cherry pie in season 3 of Twin Peaks.
But the fascinating thing about it is that this vampire, for Rollin, who most of his filmography is filmed in France in these kind of ghostly, foggy chateaus the beautiful, I think of like the movie Les Raisins de Mort, The Grapes of Death, which is filmed in like these beautiful French mountains in the south of France, all on beautiful 35 millimeter film. Lost in New York is filmed in Manhattan in Midtown on 16 millimeter film.
Well, like half of it is.
Yes, half of it is. But, that's a kind of, it's a really interesting part of it is I think Rollin just like went on vacation to New York and just brought a camera with him and like some actresses. And he was just kind of
very possibly. I mean, none of the cast seem to have appeared in almost any other films.
Yes, right. No, there's no, I mean, as far as I could tell, these are not.
And of course, they are all like extremely gorgeous French women.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of masks going on, so sometimes you can't even tell. There's just like there is a lot of like that kind of I don't know. It's people kind of emerge and recede from the film. You're never quite sure what. It is this kind of like cyclical story. It kind of comes back at the end. There is a kind of narrative there that you piece together while you're watching it after the fact. I've been wanting to watch it again since. And another thing that I really love about Rollin's movies is kind of like you're saying, the beginning and end of the movie does take place on a beach. That Rollin, you will notice the exact beach shows up quite a lot in Rollin's work. And that's something that I really find interesting, us as musicians, as artists. It is that kind of, you get the sense that Rollin is injecting something very, very personal of himself into his movies. Obviously, the fact that all of his movies are about this very specific theme with these very specific images invites you say, okay, this is like a very personal thing to this guy. But even like this beach that I believe, I'm going to get it wrong. I didn't look this up. I saw something about this at some point, but I believe this is a beach that he frequented as a kid or something like that. But it's a beach that meant a lot to him.
I'd buy it for sure. Yeah.
It's a beach that meant a lot to him because it shows up on many of his movies, the same exact one. And I just love that kind of that sort of unabashed display of the personal and imbuing that personal those personal aspects of yourself into movies. The other thing of the movie is that the music is incredible.
Oh, I mean, yeah, like Rollin always has incredible soundtracks. This one is wild. It is just one digital synth jamming on it, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, most of his other movies, I will say that I did an album on Lies. My first album on Lies, that was a lot of samples from Rollin soundtracks. That was me in my early 20s just sampling Rollin soundtracks. A lot of his soundtracks have kind of like funk, popol vuh kind of stuff going on. Very kind of...
funky, sleazy, but then also crowdy, synthy.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
exactly.
It's common territory for a lot of these kinds of films, kind of like library music synth freakouts with like, you know, kind of like proto disco funk, but the Rollin ones are just particularly fucking good.
They're particularly good, and they particularly match the tone of whatever movie they're in. Some movies are a little sleazier than others and play that up in the soundtrack.
Totally.
But yeah, the soundtrack of this movie, Lost in New York, was quite wild, and it was just sounded like someone just playing around with a Roland D50 or something. It was great.
yeah. It still is evocative of the same kind of like spacey library music jam kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But also resolutely late 80s. Yeah. I think you're probably right. It probably is a D50. But yeah, it has.
Just my guess, but
Yeah, I mean, it has a late '80s digital synth sound, kind of like Rompler kind of sound, you know.
yeah,
It's sick.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, anyway.
the movie is just it's flawless. If it was 20 minutes longer, it might be just kind of a chore. But the fact it clocks in at under an hour, it's really just perfect.
I think that's important for us to learn as musicians as well, right? I mean, like, we spend a lot of our time in clubs, right, where we would have to play live sets that would have to fit into it. That would have to be an hour or something. It'd have to fit into like a club's billing, and the clubs technically want people to be there as long as possible. Well, depends where you are, but generally people want to play a long time. I would have loved
playing a live set in the club is very different than playing a live set in like a bar or like rock club context. Where like, you know, our set tonight's like it's around 40 minutes, or like, oh, we're gonna play a long one. It's, you know, like closer to an hour. Like set times in those contexts are kind of, you know, they're fungible.
I would have loved to get up there and play a live set for 20 minutes.
Right.
Just, you got DJs. They'll be happy to play more records, you know? But
I mean,
there's something about the brevity.
Sometimes that will fly in those contexts, but often not. Yeah.
But it's just the brevity of a film like this, especially in an age when movies are too long.
Oh God, everything's too fucking long. Everything is 2.5, 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours.
It's ridiculous.
I am very curious.
Got streaming brain.
I am very curious about Brady Corbett's new film, though, which is supposed to be over 4 hours long and spanning. No, I mean, but did you hear about it? It's going to be X-rated, a Western that spans 150 years of time and is going to be over 4 hours. Okay. Call me curious. Okay.
X-rated Western. You're starting to speak my language.
Right. See.
But that's the reason. I mean, I just watched that movie, The Secret Agent, by Kleber Mendonça Filho, the Brazilian director, which was quite good. But it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I was like,
that's long.
Trim it up a little bit. One battle after another. Obviously, that was the big movie from the past year. It's a bit long. Long.
My issue with One Battle wasn't that it was too long as much as that it started at like a 9 in terms of intensity and then just stays there and then goes up to like 10.5.
Yeah.
And it's just like there's no ebb and flow to it. Like it dips down for like, you get kind of like 15 minutes of kind of like downtime like after the first act.
Right.
But it just winds up feeling kind of grating.
Yeah, it did feel a bit like that, especially like because I am one of the maybe 3 people in the country who went into the movie as a pension head. And I was like, okay, great. Like, give me that Inherent Vice. Give me that bumbling, just kind of stoned haze. And it was a little like, I was like, oh, okay, it's like a little, this is a little much, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing for me is that the film kind of front loads a lot of the like, you know, kind of potentially dubious racial politics that in the broader picture of the film are not that weird, because once you understand that you're operating in like once you understand the universe that the film is operating in, you kind of roll with it. You realize it's satire. You realize it's absurdist. Mm-hmm. When the film opens with like, you know, the race play scene basically is like,
yeah.
Like, they didn't need to front load that stuff in that way. They could have established a little more clearly, like, okay, we're operating in a ridiculous world.
Yeah.
It might have, I mean, because just some of that stuff winds up landing like Tarantino-esque, basically, you know?
It does a little bit, yeah. But I did appreciate the fact that, you know, it is kind of funny. You know, we're talking about this in the wake of ICE violence in Minnesota and stuff, and you know, the Gregory Bovino character that's been compared to Sean Penn quite accurately. And it is funny, you know. Actually, I did kind of appreciate the fact that the movie was so, was just kind of like, yeah, it's just kind of these evil fucking crazy crazy people that run society and, have their little minions like Sean Penn out there. And it did remind me of, because I mentioned the movie The Secret Agent by Clemper Mendoza Filho, his movie before that, Bacurau from 2019, is a movie that I was watching recently, which is kind of about, it takes place in the northeast of Brazil, the Sertão, which is kind of like the Brazilian West. In the Brazilian imagination, it's kind of the same, serves a similar function to the Wild West. And it's a movie about basically like these kind of, racist, like more or less genocidal, what's the word? Like, not even settler colonialists, because they're not like settling. They're just like out to just kill basically like who they perceive as their inferiors. And I wanted to think that it was kind of a bit heavy-handed, but then it's like, man,
not heavy-handed enough.
Not heavy-handed enough. I mean, in a time of ICE and IDF and everything, it's just like, it's sadly, and that's one thing that I did like about One Battle After Another. It was just kind of like, yep, like this is kind of the bullshit we're dealing with.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, other people I know have been critical kind of its political messaging, but that doesn't bother me on really most grounds. I think it's great the film just fully went there with all of that.
Yeah.
The Christmas Adventurer things, not from the universe of Pynchon, but it's a pretty good facsimile. So
yeah.
And it's real. Well, I mean, also in the wake of the last couple weeks of Epstein bombs, like it's guess what? We are ruled by eugenicist monsters. Hey. It's like it couldn't be more on the nose,
Well, this comes as a surprise to me. This comes as a big shock to me.
Oh my God.
Well, we managed to introduce our music about podcasts and talk about movies for half an hour. So
hey, no. I mean, we talked films only for the last 20. So
yeah. But we're excited to come back with more Basecamp Beta. We got some interesting people lined up that we're excited to talk to and share their stories and really just talk about I don't know what being a musician is like and all of that.
Yeah, let's fucking do it.
So welcome back, Sean.
Welcome back, Chris.